Welcome to the Digital Marketing Podcast brought to you by targetinternet.com. My name is Kieran Rogers.
I'm Louise Crossley.
And I'm Daniel Rolls.
And in this episode, we are talking about social media trends and trip hazards for 2025.
Okay, so our friends over at Hootsuite have put out their social media trends report for 2025. And we just want to run you through. I'm not going to go through all the kind of different statements, but just go through a couple of them. And I want to get the reaction from Kieran and Louise, what they think about these. Because I read some of these stats. It's an absolutely fascinating report. So you go over to hootsuite.com, it's in their research section, and it's their social trends report. We'll put it into the show notes, targetinternet.com/podcast. But there's some stats that are great and some stats that are like, oh no, we're not doing that, are we? And oh, great, more of that. So I think we need to kind of look at it in context. I just wanted to give a shout to Sarah Dawley, who is the head of content at Hootsuite, that very kindly, the day that we're recording this, the fourth edition of my digital branding book came out, and she did a lovely kind of insert for that for us. So thank you, Sarah, for doing that. Your copy will be on the way shortly. But thanks to that, we've also got a bit of a giveaway. So if you sign up to the newsletter, targetinternet.com/newsletter, we've got a load of copies of the book. I will even sign them to ruin the resale value of them for you as well. So let's go through and look at just a few of these trends and see what your reflection on them is. So the first one says, and this is not necessarily in line in the way they publish them, I've just highlighted a few of them. Social teams ditch brand consistency to push creative boundaries. And what they've basically kind of gone through is, and they've got some stats that kind of go with these as well, which is that people are being a little bit more relaxed with their brands, and they're trying different things out. They said more than 60% of social content aims to entertain, educate, or inform without direct promotion for nearly half of organizations, which I think, okay, we'll talk about that. And then 80 to 100% of social content is entertainment driven for a quarter of organizations. What's your gut reaction to that, Kieran? We'll go to the cynic in the room first.
I suppose for me, it just begs the question, why are you doing it? I suppose it's good in a way, because it means they're not just trying to, turn a dime on everything that they do. But at the same point, I don't know, it's just getting the balance seems a bit off to me.
But I think there's some good examples of this, right? Because when you think, especially visual platforms like TikTok and Instagram, maybe you shouldn't necessarily post your product a lot anyway. Because if you look at Red Bull, they never post on their Instagram and they post, come and buy a can of Red Bull. It's all about the experience. And it's everyone, it's the thrill of what it's like to have a Red Bull, and everyone's off doing like ski sports and stuff like that. And it's a lot about emotion, and it's not very product focused anyway. And that's really what's worked for them.
Well, I think this is a key thing, because it says here, a quarter of organizations, up to 100% of their content is entertainment driven. Right. Now, I think we spoke about this in the previous episode. I think that's great if it relates to your brand. So if you are a Red Bull, okay. Now, I'd also say with Red Bull, there's a huge disconnect between their social media content and their TV advertising. So, the Red Bull gives you wings with the line cartoons, and then the extreme sports stuff is so disconnected because some history of the brand as well. But I think the risk here is this, that if you are a consumer brand that wants to build that brand for entertainment, that is fantastic. Okay. And you should do this. The problem is that everyone jumps on the bandwagon and says, oh, we just need to do entertainment-based content. We need to do shorts. We need to do TikToks that are fun and, whatever it may be. Yeah, but if that doesn't align with your brand. So I think pushing brand boundaries is good. I don't think smashing your brand is necessarily very good unless you are doing a brand refresh. And I think there's a danger zone.
That define push creative boundaries.
Right. That's it. And that's it.
It's pushing, right? A push can be a good thing. It can be fatal.
So if your brand team come to you and say, what have you done here? You've just used different fonts. You've laid it out. The colors are all wrong.
Yeah.
I'm pushing brand boundaries. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So I think we've got to be careful of some of this. But it's like the authenticity thing. It's like you get these big corporate brands where the CEO is speaking straight to the camera. Is that on brand or not? Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is if that person is a personality is reflective of the brand. But how comfortable are that with it? Those people need to be media trained and all those kind of things as well. So there's a kind of area of this that we need to be careful with. I think it's interesting. But I also think there's the fear of jumping on the bandwagon. If you're not careful, it can mess things up as well.
I think this is too much encouraged. There's too much, especially the bigger the brand. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I just think it's too much at stake sometimes, and it annoys me.
Well, that's
They go in their own direction. It's like, no, that's not really the team game, is it? I always loved, years ago, I worked with a top creative from a London ad agency, and he founded the agency actually, but he had this saying, give me the luxury of a really tight brief. Right. So actually a really tight brief
expression
for him could massively increase the creativity, because you can't just do whatever you want. You have to stick within the brand. And there's the art to it. That's what a really good, solid brand. So here's the thing. If you just go Wild West on this and do your own thing, like, that could be very damaging. And yeah, there are case studies out there of teams that did this and had huge results, but it's really risky. And actually, a lot of the time, I just think they make themselves look a bit stupid, and they can be quite brand damaging. They don't have a sensible filter. That just anything for attention. That's what annoys me. It's like, no, that's not on. Whereas actually, being on brand does not mean you can't push the creative boundaries. I think it's risky to ditch them.
Right.
This is the real art.
That's
If
the
you
heart of
really
it.
want to prove you're really great at this, don't ditch the brand consistency, because that's the brand. That's what's paying you. No, get really creative within those boundaries.
The next one relates to this, and it says the outbound engagement trend. Brands drop in on creators' comments to pick up new audiences. And they're saying that, 41% of organizations have been testing out proactive engagement. So rather than just broadcast, doing some of that stuff of engaging with other stuff that's going on. And they're saying, actually, if the content creator then gets involved, you get, 1.6 times the amount of engagement. Again, wow, there's extremes of this, right? There's the adding value to a conversation, where that could be you just provide some extra valuable content, or it could be you do something funny. Like the biscuit brands in the UK have got a habit of doing this, where they'll start arguing amongst each other and kind of taking the mickey out of each other. But then there's I'm trying to hijack a creator's work to get my brand more visible. And I think that's where the desperation comes in a little bit with some of these things as well. I definitely think the proactive outreach it's hugely important, that building on those communities, those discussions that are out there. But brands have to be so careful with doing that.
It's an art again, isn't it? It's a fine line. I think if you're hijacking someone else's content, you better be adding value to it for them massively, or it's just plain rude. It's not on, is it? I don't think, to burst in on someone else's party and ruin it. And again, I see this happening, and it's not nice. But no one cares, because as long as they get attention, right, it's good. And that's what they're rewarded for. And it's like, no, somebody needs to curb this enthusiasm for just getting attention. It needs to be for the right reasons. And it needs to be you need to be community minded. You need to be respectful to the person that's created that audience that you're about to leverage on. So again, from my dividing line will be there, are you really adding value for their users, or are you just crashing in on it?
Well, let me read you the quote from the next trend. And the next trend was all about listening launches social pros into their performance marketing era. What does that mean? It means that because of limitations of attribution modeling, we can't necessarily put a real pin down a return on investment on some of this social media activity. But if we've got fairly advanced social media monitoring, those people that have got it in place are more confident of the return on investment they're getting. I think, okay, that's pretty straightforward. I don't think many people would argue with that. I can see more of the conversations happening. I can probably see more of the trends. So some advanced social media monitoring is going to help. But the quote I thought was brilliant was that he said, social listening refines the art of trend jacking. So remembering going viral was the be all end all of social media success. These days, though, social media now better, or the most part, chasing random and fleeting moments of virality is highly ineffective and inauthentic. And nothing kills a trend faster than the inevitable doubling of brands and dogpiling of brands. So it's no shock that conversations around going viral have become increasingly negative over the last year. So it's exactly what we spoke about a couple of episodes ago, whereas everyone piles onto a meme or a trend or whatever it might be, and it destroys it really, really quickly as well. So the half-life of these things has got shorter and shorter. And I come back to what we talked about in our New Year's resolutions episode, which was focus on being creative. Okay, so how could you go about and actually try and be more creative so that you could come up with a trend of your own that people are more likely to jump on your trend, because that's the way of winning this. at the end of the day as well. So I think, thinking about that.
Basically, don't be lazy.
Yeah, well, I think this is it. So trend 4 is that social media marketers double down on generative AI in 2024. And you're going to love this stat, Kieran. It says 83% of marketers say generative AI helps them create significantly more content than they could without it.
That makes me sad, because actually you've missed the opportunity. It is a fantastic opportunity for 83% to make better content
There you go.
using the generative AI, not more of it. This is the thing. We don't need more content, people. We need better content, like less content, but better. Like it's always been like this way, do one thing really well rather than 100 things
Do you know what makes me laugh?
fairly mediocrely.
I was reviewing some podcast from literally 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and I just dropped into a random moment, and it was you saying, just do less content, but do it better.
It's not hard. It's not hard, but it's
well, I
just
think
it
it
gets
is hard.
overlooked.
No, but I
because
think it
people are
is
like,
hard, and that's
oh,
the
shiny
point.
new toy. I can do a dozen things at once and look how brilliant it is. It's like, no.
But it is hard, and that is the point, because I did a podcast the other day with someone else's podcast, and it was, I said, you need to think more like a journalist, because you think, why would you read content written by a journalist? Okay, It's because barrier to entry. It's because those journalists have proved their ability to write. You trust what they're saying. They do research. They have contacts. It's something that's not just available for everyone. Can have an opinion on the news. That's what all the Facebook comments are about, or whatever it might be. So I think it is hard, and therefore it's good. If it's not hard, maybe it's not a good thing. I mean, like, recording this podcast isn't hard, I wouldn't say, from the point of view of, it's not exhausting and terrible, and I don't know, sometimes it can be, but just from the fact that, but it's taken a lot of time for us to build the relationship that we've got together. We have to do lots of research on these things. There is a barrier to entry to some extent.
But I think sometimes as well, a lot of people think creating content is hard because they're thinking, especially with video, like high production content that costs a lot of money and costs a lot of
That's a good
resources.
point.
Whereas actually you can create really good content with just your phone, as long as you're planning things out and making sure that you've got a good story behind it and you've got a good hook. It doesn't actually need to cost a lot of money.
No, and looking at some of these AI tools, I think that's another good point, is that you can do AI-based video content now that's brilliant, like explainer videos and things like that, but it's how you explain it. And I always go back to the example, right, that when we were using Lumen 5, and both Kieran and Louise created a video, and the story I tell is Kieran said, this is how you use the tool, bang, I've output one, why don't you do one, Louise? And Louise went through and was like really careful about selecting the text. And
The brief to Louise is do one that's better.
Right.
And she really did.
I remember the stats. It was 2,600% better.
It was a lot better.
Which we had a laugh about. But all it's showing, I think, is that you can use the tools quickly and get stuff out the door.
Yes.
But you can also, if you use these tools meticulously and carefully and take the time, you can create amazing stuff. And not to say, Kieran, you couldn't have done the same. Don't worry. I want to make that clear.
Thank you. It's more than that, though. I think increasingly I'm finding myself using AI a lot, but not to write content. I'll use it to research content, or I'll use it to analyze data. I've had so much fun getting ChatGPT to analyze all the customer reviews for this organization I'm doing.
It's great for that kind of stuff.
Right? Really good. And what I asked it to do was, like, I fed it several hundred reviews and said, well, I know these are all customers, so can you tell me, like, break them down into categories for me? Oh my word. It found 4 categories. It aligned them with industry norms, gave them names, and it's become central to my whole marketing plan for that organization. Really, really clever use of it, I think. Like, and it saved a ton of work, and I'd never have got there on my own. But that's the sort of, now I know who my audience are, right? Because actually it's been able to bucket them for me without me having to read hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And actually, I've started to extrapolate further data and analyze our customer base and analyze the results we get from different customer segments. And that's going to result in much better campaigns, because we can see, oh gosh, that group there, they don't convert as well. Why not? Well, what could we do to help them to understand how our product could help and improve their lives? It's just revolutionary. And so this isn't about more content, it's about better content. Because actually, if you're emailing people, you can only send them so much content. Really. If you're pushing stuff out on social media, there's only so much content people will accept from your organization or even look at. It's not, churn it out till there's no tomorrow. But is it going to get eyeballs? Probably not.
Well, it's a nice segue into the final point, because the final one was Trendfire, was that social media strategists get a new thought partner. And what it was showing is that editing, creating new, but planning content, the strategists are using these tools more.
Yeah.
And what that's suggesting is the more advanced users are using this stuff for planning. And I think those people will be at the competitive advantage. And I think this comes back to the creating the learning culture piece that we've spoken about before, which is the whole thing about actually, if you're using these tools effectively to plan, there's a much better opportunity for doing this, as opposed to just using them to pump stuff out the door.
Everybody should be a strategist with this. This is the thing, like, because that's where the smart money is. You know, what are you trying to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? Work that out before you start just doing stuff, people. Come on. That's how it works.
We have got the upcoming Social Trends live update session, which are free to anyone that subscribes to the email. So targetinternet.com/newsletter, sign up and we'll update you on those. And we've got some additional resources that we'll drop in there on this, and we'll signpost the Hootsuite report as well. So as ever, thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Podcast, and we'll speak to you next time. For more episodes, resources, to leave a review or to get in contact, go to targetinternet.com/podcast.